Hi, this is Sajjad, welcoming you to this video of Nuke Learning. Color nodes deal with color corrections, color space, and color management. Add. The Add node lets you offset a channel's values. It adds a fixed value to the channel, which in effect lightens the whole channel. You can also add a negative value to a channel, in which the channel gets darker. Clamp. This node constrains, or clamps, values in the selected channels to a specified range. By default, it clamps all channels to values between 0 and 1. This can be useful for ensuring that the input's blackest blacks and whitest whites will be visible on an intended display device, or for restricting data fed to a subsequent node that does not support numbers outside this range. Clip test applies zebra stripes to all pixels outside a specified range. This can help you ensure that the input's blackest blacks and whitest whites are visible on an intended display device. By default, clip test highlights any pixels that are outside the range from 0 to 1. CMS test pattern. This node generates calibration patterns for color management. You should run the output of this node through a color management node and then render the result with a generate LUT node. Color correct. The color correct node is used to make quick adjustments to contrast, gamma, gain, and offset. You can apply these to a clip's master shadows, midtones, or highlights. Color lookup allows you to make contrast, gamma, gain, and offset adjustments using lookup tables. Lookup tables refer to line graphs of a given color channel's brightness. The horizontal axis represents the channel's original or input values, and the vertical axis represents the channel's new or output values. Color matrix. Color matrix multiplies the RGB colors by an arbitrary 3x3 matrix. This is useful for transforming color spaces. The color space node converts images from one color space to another, for example, from Nuke's native color space to other color spaces, more appropriate to a given process or intended display device. Color transfer. Color transfer lets you match the colors of one clip with those of another. It changes the colors in input B to match input A. Crosstalk. Adds or removes crosstalk, or bleeding from one color channel to another. Each output color channel is the sum of 3 lookup tables, each indexed by one of the input color channels. The horizontal axis represents the channel's original or input values, and the vertical axis represents the channel's new or output values. Exposure allows you to adjust the exposure of the input sequence using f-stops, printer lights, film densities, or Cineon values. Expression allows you to apply complex mathematical formulas to a channel's values using C-like syntax expressions. If necessary, you can apply different expressions to different sets of channels. Gamma applies a constant gamma value to a set of channels. This lightens or darkens the midtones. Generate LOT generates lookup tables, or LOTs, from color management nodes downstream of CMS test pattern node. Grade lets you define white and black points by sampling pixels from the viewer, setting the brightest parts of the image to pure white and the darkest to pure black. In this manner, can help you add punch to overexposed images. You can also use this node for matching foreground plates to background plates. Hist EQ alters the histogram of the input image to be flat. This process is called histogram equalization. It can be useful for increasing the contrast in an image. For example, if the background and foreground in the image are both bright or both dark. Histogram graphs the number of pixels at each brightness level. This is a useful gauge to see whether the input image has a good distribution of shadows, midtones, and highlights. You can also use this node to adjust the tonal range of the input image, but using histogram clamps super blacks and super whites. If you don't want this to happen, use the grade node instead. HSV tool lets you simultaneously adjust hue, saturation, and value components from a single control panel. It also features a color replacement tool and makes an excellent keyer. The main strength of this node is the precision it offers in limiting corrections to a narrow sample of colors. You can limit the correction to certain hues by sampling a few pixels and then shifting their values. Because you limit the color range, the surrounding image is generally unaffected by the shift. Hue Correct lets you make precision adjustments to the levels of saturation in a range of hues. You do so via edits to a series of suppression curves. The horizontal axis represents the original or input, saturation, and the vertical axis represents the new or output, saturation. By choosing which curve you edit and how much of that curve you alter, you can precisely limit the influence of the effect. For the compositor, Hue Correct is obviously of greatest use in diminishing green, blue, or red screen spill. For the times when you just want to correct the saturation component and don't require limiting the correction to any particular range of hues, you can also use the saturation node. Hue Shift. Hue Shift transforms the input image's color space. It works by transforming the colors to CIE XYZ space and then doing simple scales and rotates on the space. In XYZ space, X and Z control the color and Y is the brightness. Invert. Inverts a channel's values. To invert a channel is to subtract its values from 1, which causes its blacks to become white and its whites to become black. In the course of building a script, you'll have frequent need to invert matte in particular. Log2Lin. Whenever you read a clip into a script, it is automatically converted to Nuke's native color space, which is 32-bit per channel RGB, linear format. This conversion takes place even if the clip you read in is in the Kodak Cineon format, which is a logarithmic format. The reverse of this conversion is called a lin-to-log conversion. Also, automatically takes place when you write the processed element back out of the script. That is, Nuke automatically converts it back into a Cineon element. Match grade. Match grade allows you to automatically calculate a grade to match the colors in the source input to the colors in the target input. Min color calculates the difference between the darkest value in the input image and the target value, and then adds the result to the image. This sets the darkest pixel to the target value. Multiply lets you multiply a channel's values by a given factor, which has the effect of lightening the channel while preserving the black point. This operation is also known as gain. OCIO-CDL transform applies an ASC-CDL, American Society of Cinematographers color decision list, grade based on the open color IO library, OCIO color space. Much like the standard color space node, you can use the OCIO color space node for converting an image sequence from one color space to another. The OCIO color space node is based on the open color IO library, OCIO display. Uses the open color IO library to apply a color space conversion to an image sequence so that it can be accurately represented on a specific display device. The OCIO display node is based on the open color IO library. OCIO file transform uses the open color IO library to load a color space conversion from a file and apply it. The OCIO file transform node is based on the open color IO library. OCIO log convert. Sometimes log data is required for certain processing operations, like plate resizing or pulling keys. Usually, a color space is provided specifically for these operations. The OCIO log convert node uses the OpenColor IO library to convert from compositing log to scene linear, or the reverse. OCIO look transform. This node applies a creative color space transform using a predefined look in the OCIO config file. P-loglin converts between logarithmic and linear encoding color space based on a single gray point rather than the standard Cineon formula with a black point and white point. This method is frequently referred to as Josh Pine's log conversion. Posterize reduces the color resolution of an image. This creates abrupt changes from one tone to another, producing a dramatic graphic effect. Roll-off contrast applies a contrast curve with smooth fall-off at the low and high ends, equally across all channels in the input image. The center value controls the overall brightness of the colors, and the contrast value increases or decreases the contrast of the image. Use soft clip to control the amount of roll-off, and check override values to adjust the tension and extent of the soft clip curve. Sampler. This node converts a horizontal scan line of pixel data into a lookup curve. The Viewer Sampler widget, or Sampler Y coordinate, selects the scan line. Sampler X is ignored. The sampler node can be useful for visualizing the effects of color corrections on the image. Saturation. For the times when you just want to correct an image's saturation and don't require limiting the correction to any particular range of hues, use the saturation node. If you do want to adjust the levels of saturation in a range of hues, for example, to diminish green, blue, or red screen spill, use the Hue Correct node instead. Soft Clip compresses high dynamic range HDR imagery into the 0-1 range. Because simple color compression changes the apparent chroma and contrast of the image, the conversion control allows for several compression modes that try to preserve colors. Toe lifts the black level in a similar way to gain controls in other color correction nodes, but with a roll-off so that whites are mostly not affected. This makes the shadows in your image lighter. Vector Field. Vector Field applies color values from lookup tables, allowing you to make complex color corrections quickly using pre-calculated files.